The sun was setting over the horizon of Aurelia, casting a warm orange glow across the alien landscape. The planet's sky shimmered with hues of purple and gold, reflecting off the crystalline structures that dotted the colony like scattered jewels. Ethan Carter stood on the edge of the energy grid maintenance platform, his hands covered in grease from hours of repairing malfunctioning conduits. He wiped his forehead with the back of his sleeve, feeling the cool breeze brush against his face. It was moments like these when he could almost forget how far away Earth was. Aurelia had been humanity's first real step into the stars, a beacon of hope after centuries of dreaming about life beyond their home world. For years, people had talked about colonizing other planets, but it wasn't until now that it actually happened. This new beginning came with challenges, though. Everything here felt fragile, as if one wrong move could shatter the delicate balance they'd built. And yet, despite all the risks, Ethan couldn't help but feel proud to be part of something so monumental. Behind him, Laura Bennett approached, her boots crunching softly against the rocky ground. She carried a tablet tucked under her arm, its screen glowing faintly in the fading light. Her blonde hair was tied back into a loose ponytail, and her green eyes sparkled with curiosity. Laura was the kind of person who saw wonder everywhere. She looked even in places where others might only see danger or hardship. "Hey, Ethan," she said, stopping beside him. "How's the grid holding up?" Ethan shrugged, glancing at the massive towers that hummed quietly nearby. "It'll hold for now, but we're pushing these systems harder than they were designed for. If we don't get some reinforcements, soon, we're going to have problems." Laura nodded thoughtfully. "I know what you mean. Things are getting stretched thin around here. Still, can you believe we're actually doing this? Living on another planet? Sometimes I wake up and think, I'm dreaming." Ethan chuckled, leaning back against the railing. "Yeah, well, dreams usually don't involve fixing busted power lines at midnight, or dodging those weird critters that crawl out of the forest at night." Laura laughed, but her expression quickly turned serious. "Speaking of weird stuff, have you heard about the signals?" Ethan frowned. "What signals?" She tapped her tablet, pulling up a series of data graphs. "Commander Mitchell called me in earlier today. They've picked up strange transmissions coming from somewhere, deep in the unexplored regions of the planet. At first they thought it was interference from the atmosphere, but then they realized it's too consistent, too deliberate." Ethan stared at the screen, his brow furrowing. "You think it's aliens?" "I don't know," Laura admitted, "but whatever it is, it's not natural. That much is clear." Before either of them could say more, a loudspeaker crackled to life above their heads. Commander Ryan Mitchell's voice echoed across the colony. "Attention, all personnel. Report to the main assembly hall immediately. This is not a drill." Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. Neither of them needed to speak. They both knew this couldn't be good news. The assembly hall buzzed with nervous energy as colonists filed in, taking their seats. Some whispered anxiously while others sat silently, gripping the edges of their chairs. Ethan and Laura found spots near the front, close enough to see Commander Mitchell standing at the podium. His tall frame and broad shoulders made him an imposing figure, but tonight there was no mistaking the tension in his posture. Once everyone was seated, Mitchell cleared his throat and began speaking. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice. As many of you may already know, our sensors have detected unusual activity originating from the uncharted areas of Aurelia. Initially, we dismissed these readings as anomalies caused by the planet's unique environment. However, recent analysis suggests otherwise." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "The signals appear to be artificial, potentially evidence of intelligent life. We cannot ignore this development. While we remain cautious, we must also consider the possibility that we are not alone on this planet." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Ethan leaned closer to Laura. "Told you," he muttered under his breath. Mitchell raised a hand to quiet the room. "To address this situation, I am assembling a reconnaissance team. Their mission will be to locate the source of the signals and determine whether they pose any threat to the colony. Volunteers are needed." Silence fell over the hall. No one moved. Everyone seemed frozen, weighing the risks of stepping into the unknown. Finally, Ethan stood up. "I'll go," he said firmly. Laura hesitated for a moment before rising to join him. "Me too," Mitchell nodded approvingly. "Thank you. You won't be going alone. Captain Daniel Hayes will lead the expedition. He has experience dealing with hostile environments and will ensure your safety." Ethan glanced toward the back of the room where Hayes stood watching silently. The man exuded confidence, but there was also something guarded about him, as if he kept his true thoughts hidden behind a wall of professionalism. After dismissing the assembly, Ethan and Laura lingered behind to discuss logistics with Mitchell and Hayes. Maps of Aurelia were spread out on a table, highlighting the areas where the signals had been strongest. The terrain looked brutal: dense forests, jagged cliffs, and rivers of molten rock. "This isn't going to be easy," Hayes warned, tapping a finger on the map. "We'll need to move fast and stay alert. Whatever's out there, it doesn't want to be found." Ethan nodded grimly. "Understood." As they prepared to leave, Laura pulled Ethan aside. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. "We don't even know what we're walking into." "I'm sure," Ethan replied. "If there's a chance we're not alone here, we need to find out. Besides, someone has to make sure you don't wander off chasing bugs again." Laura rolled her eyes but smiled nonetheless. "Fine. But if we run into trouble, I'm counting on you to keep us alive." "Deal," Ethan said, grinning. The next morning, the team gathered at the edge of the colony, loading supplies onto hovercrafts designed for rough terrain. Alongside Ethan and Laura were several other volunteers: Dr. Marcus Lee, a physicist specializing in xenotechnology; Private Sophie Grant, a sharpshooter with nerves of steel; and Corporal Alex Rivera, a medic known for his quick thinking in emergencies. Hayes gave a final briefing before departure. "Stick together, follow orders, and remember, if anything feels off, report it immediately. We're explorers, not heroes." With that, the engines roared to life and the convoy set off into the wilderness. The journey began smoothly, but as they ventured deeper into Aurelia's untamed regions, the air grew heavier, filled with an eerie stillness. Trees loomed overhead, their twisted branches forming a canopy that blocked out most of the sunlight. Strange noises echoed around them: clicks, whistles, and low growls that sent shivers down Ethan's spine. Despite the unease, Laura remained fascinated, pointing out peculiar plants and creatures along the way. "Look at this," she exclaimed, crouching to examine a cluster of glowing mushrooms. "They emit bioluminescence just like fireflies back home." Ethan shook his head, smirking. "Only you would get excited about glowing fungus." Laura shot him a playful glare. "Science is exciting, Ethan. Try paying attention sometime." Their banter helped ease the tension, but it didn't last long. As dusk approached, the team encountered their first obstacle: a wide river of bubbling lava blocking their path. The heat radiating from it was intense, forcing them to retreat several feet. "Well, this complicates things," Hayes muttered, studying the flow of molten rock. "We'll need to find another route." While the others debated options, Ethan wandered closer to the riverbank, examining the surrounding area. That's when he noticed something odd: a series of markings carved into the stone near the water's edge. They looked deliberate, almost like symbols. "Hey, take a look at this," he called out, waving the group over. Laura knelt beside him, tracing the grooves with her fingers. "These aren't natural formations. Someone, or something, made these." Hayes frowned, scanning the area warily. "Or maybe it's a trap. Keep your guard up." As night fell, the team set up camp a safe distance from the river. The darkness brought a new level of discomfort, with shadows dancing unpredictably in the flickering light of their campfire. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, though every time he turned to check, there was nothing there. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by strange dreams of glowing orbs and haunting melodies. When dawn finally broke, Ethan woke to find Laura staring into the distance, her expression unreadable. "What's wrong?" he asked, sitting up. She pointed toward the horizon. Through the trees, faint lights pulsed rhythmically, almost like a heartbeat. "We're not alone," she whispered, And with that, the adventure truly began. The pulsing lights in the distance were both mesmerizing and unsettling. Ethan squinted, trying to make out more details through the thick foliage. The glow seemed to shift and change, as if alive, drawing them closer with an almost magnetic pull. Laura was already grabbing her gear, her earlier weariness replaced by sheer excitement. "We should check it out," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This could be what we've been looking for." Ethan hesitated, glancing at Captain Hayes, who stood nearby with his arms crossed. The man's sharp eyes scanned the area, his jaw tight with suspicion. "It could also be a trap," Hayes countered. "We don't know what's waiting for us out there." "Exactly," Ethan chimed in. "For all we know, those lights are meant to lure us in." Laura rolled her eyes but didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Dr. Marcus Lee, who had been quietly observing the exchange. "What do you think, Marcus? Could this be some kind of alien technology?" Marcus adjusted his glasses, stepping closer to get a better look. "It's possible. The patterns of light suggest intelligence behind them, but without studying them up close, it's hard to say for sure." He paused, then added cautiously, "Still, caution is key. We can't afford to rush into anything blindly." Hayes nodded approvingly. "Agreed. Here's the plan. Ethan, you and I will lead the way. Laura, stay close to Marcus. He might need your help analyzing whatever we find. Sophie and Alex, keep watch. If anything moves, shoot first and ask questions later." The group fell silent, each member mentally preparing themselves for what lay ahead. They packed up their camp quickly, leaving no trace behind, and moved toward the mysterious lights. The forest around them grew darker as they ventured deeper, the towering trees blocking out most of the sunlight. Strange sounds echoed in the distance, low hums, rustling leaves, and occasional screeches that sent shivers down their spines. As they drew closer to the source of the lights, the air became thicker, almost suffocating. Ethan noticed beads of sweat forming on his forehead despite the cool shade. The ground beneath their feet felt softer, spongy, like walking on damp moss. Every step made a faint squelching sound, which only added to the eerie atmosphere. Finally, they reached a clearing. In the center stood a massive structure, unlike anything they'd ever seen before. It looked ancient, its surface covered in intricate carvings that glowed faintly in the dim light. The symbols resembled the ones Ethan had spotted near the lava river, but these were far more elaborate. The glowing orbs they'd seen from afar were embedded into the walls, pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. This is incredible," Laura breathed, her voice filled with awe. She approached the structure cautiously, running her fingers over the carvings. "These designs, they're not random. They tell a story." Ethan joined her, examining the carvings more closely. Some depicted celestial bodies, while others showed humanoid figures performing rituals around one of the glowing orbs. "Do you think this place belongs to whoever sent the signals?" he asked. "It's possible," Laura replied. "But why would they send messages now, after all this time?" Before anyone could answer, Private Sophie Grant raised her hand, sharply. "Movement!" she hissed, pointing toward the edge of the clearing. Everyone froze, their eyes darting toward the shadows. At first there was nothing. Then, slowly, shapes began to emerge from the darkness. Tall, slender figures stepped into the light, their translucent skin shimmering like glass. Their large, almond-shaped eyes reflected the glow of the orbs, and their movements were fluid, almost graceful. For a moment, no one spoke. The tension in the air was palpable, broken only by the soft hum of the glowing orbs. Finally, Hayes broke the silence. "Weapons ready," he ordered quietly, though he kept his rifle lowered for now. To everyone's surprise, the figures didn't attack. Instead, they raised their hands in a gesture that seemed peaceful. One of them stepped forward, tilting its head as if studying the humans intently. Its mouth opened slightly, emitting a series of melodic tones that resonated through the clearing. What is it saying?" Sophie stammered, gripping her weapon tightly. "I don't know," Laura admitted, her voice trembling with excitement. "But it's trying to communicate." Dr. Marcus Lee pulled out a handheld device and began recording the sounds. If we can analyze these frequencies, maybe we can decipher their language. Ethan took a cautious step forward, raising his hands in a similar gesture of peace. "We mean no harm," he said, his voice steady despite the knot in his stomach. "We came here because of the signals." The figure tilted its head again, mimicking Ethan's tone with another series of melodic notes. This time, Laura noticed something remarkable. The tones seemed to match the patterns carved into the structure. "It's referencing the carvings," she whispered. "They're using music as a form of communication." Encouraged by this discovery, Laura tried responding with a simple tune of her own. The figure paused, listening carefully before replying, with a different sequence of tones. Back and forth they went, creating a strange yet beautiful dialogue. Slowly, the rest of the team relaxed, lowering their weapons as trust began to build. After several minutes, the figure gestured toward the glowing orbs. Laura followed its gaze, her eyes widening with realization. "I think it wants us to touch one of them." Hayes frowned, stepping between Laura and the structure. "Are you sure about this? What if it's dangerous?" "It's worth the risk," Laura insisted. "This could be our chance to learn more about them, and ourselves." Reluctantly, Hayes nodded. "Fine, but if anything goes wrong, we retreat immediately." Taking a deep breath, Laura reached out and placed her hand on one of the orbs. Instantly, the entire structure lit up, bathing the clearing in radiant light. Images began to project from the walls, holograms showing scenes of stars, planets, and civilizations long gone. The humanoid figures appeared again, interacting with the glowing orbs in ways that suggested reverence or worship. Ethan stared in amazement, struggling to process what he was seeing. This changes everything," he murmured. But just as quickly as the projections began, they stopped. The glowing orbs dimmed, and the figures stepped back, disappearing into the shadows once more. For a moment, the team stood in stunned silence, unsure of what to do next. Then, without warning, their communication devices crackled to life. Static filled the air, followed by a distorted voice. "Team, come in!" It was Commander Mitchell calling from the colony. Hayes grabbed his communicator, speaking urgently. "Commander, this is Hayes. We've made contact." "Repeat, we've made contact." There was a pause before Mitchell responded. "Understood. Return to base immediately. We have new intel regarding the signals." Hayes glanced at the others, his expression grim. "Looks like our work here isn't done yet." As they prepared to leave, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Shadows danced at the edges of the clearing, and faint whispers seemed to echo in the wind. Whatever secrets Aurelia held, they were far from unraveling them completely. And so, with heavy hearts and racing minds, the team turned back toward the colony, knowing full well that their journey was only beginning. The journey back to the colony felt longer than the trip out. Each step seemed heavier, weighed down by the questions swirling in their minds. What had they just witnessed? Who, or what, were those translucent figures? And why had they chosen to reveal themselves now? Ethan couldn't stop thinking about the holograms, replaying the images in his head. The glowing orbs, the celestial maps, the rituals. It all pointed to something far greater than humanity's arrival on Aurelia. Laura walked beside him, her expression a mix of excitement and unease. "Did you see how they responded to us?" she asked, breaking the silence. "They weren't hostile. They wanted to share something. Or show us something," Ethan replied, his voice low. "But what if it's not just knowledge they're offering? What if there's more to it?" Hayes, who was leading the group, glanced over his shoulder. "Speculation won't get us anywhere. Focus on getting back safely. We'll figure things out once we reach the colony." Despite Hayes's stern tone, no one could deny the tension hanging over them. The forest around them felt different now, denser, darker, as if it were closing in. Shadows moved unpredictably, and every rustle of leaves made Private Sophie Grant tighten her grip on her rifle. She muttered under her breath, scanning the trees for any sign of movement. "It's like they're still watching us," Sophie said finally, voicing what everyone else was thinking. Ethan nodded but didn't respond. He couldn't shake the feeling that unseen eyes were following their every move. Even the air seemed charged, buzzing faintly against his skin. When they stopped briefly to rest, Laura pulled out her tablet, trying to make sense of the data they'd collected so far. These tones, they match patterns found in ancient Earth languages, she explained, showing the others the screen. It's almost like music is their universal language. If we can decode it, we might be able to communicate better next time. Dr. Marcus Lee leaned in, studying the graphs. Fascinating. But decoding an alien language isn't going to happen overnight. We'll need more resources and time. Time was something they didn't have. As they resumed their trek, the team noticed subtle changes in their surroundings. The path they'd taken earlier was no longer clear. Vines and roots had grown across it, forcing them to carve through with machetes. The glowing mushrooms that had lined the trail were dimmer now, their light flickering weakly. "This isn't normal," Alex Rivera muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's like the forest is changing while we're walking through it." Hayes frowned, his sharp gaze scanning the area. "Stay alert. Something's not right here." Their suspicions were confirmed when they reached the lava river, where it had been calm and steady before. It now churned violently, spewing molten rock into the air. The heat was unbearable, forcing them to retreat several feet. Worse still, the makeshift bridge they'd constructed earlier was gone. Destroyed. Completely. "Great," Ethan groaned, staring at the impassable gap. "Now what?" "We find another way," Hayes said firmly. "Split up into pairs. Search for a crossing point. Stay within sight of each other." Ethan paired with Laura, while Hayes went with Sophie. Marcus and Alex stayed behind, keeping watch over the supplies. As Ethan and Laura moved along the riverbank, they spotted strange footprints in the soft soil. Three-toed prints that matched none of the creatures they had encountered so far. "Do you think these belong to the figures we met?" Laura whispered, crouching to examine the tracks. Ethan shrugged. "Maybe. Or maybe something else is out here." Before they could investigate further, a loud roar echoed through the forest, shaking the ground beneath their feet. Both froze, hearts pounding. Another roar followed, closer this time. From the shadows emerged a massive creature, its body covered in thick, armored scales. Its eyes glowed red, and its jaws dripped with saliva as it let out a guttural growl. "Back away slowly," Ethan instructed, keeping his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his chest. But the creature wasn't interested in negotiation. With a deafening screech, it lunged toward them, forcing Ethan and Laura to dive out of the way. The others heard the commotion and rushed to help, firing shots to drive the beast back. It roared in pain but didn't retreat, instead charging directly at Hayes and Sophie. "Fall back," Hayes shouted, reloading his weapon. "We can't take it head on." The team regrouped near the river, desperately searching for a way to escape. Just as the creature prepared to strike again, a sudden burst of light illuminated the clearing. The humanoid figures reappeared, surrounding the creature with glowing orbs in their hands. The orbs emitted a high-pitched frequency that caused the creature to writhe in agony before collapsing to the ground unconscious. For a moment, everything was still. Then one of the figures stepped forward, gesturing toward the river. A narrow pathway of solidified rock began forming, bridging the gap between the two sides. "They're helping us," Laura whispered, awestruck. Hayes hesitated, clearly torn between gratitude and caution. Finally, he nodded. "Let's go. Quickly." The team crossed the makeshift bridge, glancing nervously at the figures as they passed. Once they were safely on the other side, the figures vanished into the forest, leaving behind only the faint hum of their orbs. Back at the colony, Commander Mitchell greeted them with urgency. "Good timing," he said as they entered the command center. "We've intercepted new signals, not from Aurelia, but from space. Something's heading our way." On the main screen, a series of readings showed a massive fleet approaching the outer edges of the solar system. The ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, their shapes jagged and menacing. "The Voidborn," Marcus murmured, recognizing the description from the holograms. "That's what the Aurelians called them." Mitchell turned to the group, his expression grim. "If what you saw out there is true, then we're facing an enemy capable of destroying entire planets. We need answers, And fast. Ethan exchanged a glance with Laura. The Aurelians mentioned an artifact. Whatever it is, it might be our only chance. And where exactly do we find this artifact? Hayes asked, skeptically. Laura tapped her tablet, pulling up the carvings they'd photographed. These symbols, they're coordinates. If we follow them, they'll lead us to the artifact. Mitchell nodded decisively. Then that's your next mission. Find the artifact and bring it back. Humanity's survival depends on it. As the team prepared for their next journey, Ethan couldn't help but feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. They were no longer just explorers. They were soldiers, diplomats, and pioneers, all rolled into one. And as daunting as the task ahead was, he knew they had no choice but to face it head on. With determination burning in their hearts, the team set out once more, ready to uncover the secrets of Aurelia, and perhaps save not only themselves, but the entire galaxy. The journey to find the artifact was unlike anything Ethan and his team had faced before. Guided by the coordinates Laura had decoded from the carvings, they ventured deeper into Aurelia's uncharted regions. The landscape grew stranger with every step. Massive crystal formations jutted out of the ground like jagged teeth. Rivers of liquid metal shimmered under the dim light, and the air crackled with an energy that made their skin tingle. Ethan kept glancing over his shoulder, half expecting another ambush or some unseen threat to emerge from the shadows. But so far the forest remained eerily quiet, as if holding its breath. Even the usual sounds of wildlife were absent, leaving only the soft crunch of their boots against the rocky terrain. Laura walked beside him, her tablet in hand, constantly checking their progress against the map. "We're getting close," she said, finally breaking the silence. "The signal from the artifact is stronger now." "That's good news," Ethan replied, though his tone betrayed his unease. "But why does it feel like we're walking into a trap?" Hayes, who was leading the group, turned to face them. "Because we probably are," he said bluntly. "This entire planet feels like one big test. Every step we take, every decision we make, it's all being watched." Sophie Grant tightened her grip on her rifle, scanning the trees nervously. "Then let's hope we pass whatever test comes next." As they pressed forward, the environment shifted dramatically. The dense forest gave way to a sprawling canyon, its walls lined with glowing veins of what looked like molten gold. At the bottom of the canyon lay a massive cavern entrance shrouded in mist. The hum of energy emanating from within was almost deafening, vibrating through their bones. "This has to be it," Marcus whispered, his eyes wide with wonder. "The source of the artifact." Before anyone could respond, the ground beneath them trembled violently. Rocks tumbled down the canyon walls, forcing the team to scramble for cover. When the shaking subsided, they found themselves surrounded by strange, shadowy figures, tall and skeletal, with glowing red eyes. "These aren't the same beings we met earlier?" Alex muttered, backing away slowly. "These look wrong." "They're constructs," Laura realized, pointing at the faint cracks running along their translucent bodies. "Like guardians created to protect the artifact." One of the figures stepped forward, raising a clawed hand. A deep, guttural voice echoed in their minds, bypassing spoken language entirely. "Prove your worth." Without warning, the constructs attacked, moving with unnatural speed. Sophie fired her weapon, but the bullets passed harmlessly through their forms. Hayes cursed under his breath, realizing they were dealing with something beyond conventional weapons. "Stay together," he shouted, drawing his combat knife. "Find their weak spots." Ethan ducked as one of the constructs swung at him, narrowly, avoiding being impaled. He spotted a pulsating core embedded in its chest, a weak point. Grabbing a shard of rock from the ground, he hurled it with all his strength, striking the core. The construct shattered into pieces, collapsing into dust. "There," Ethan yelled, pointing at the cores. "Aim for those!" The others followed his lead, working together to take down the remaining constructs. It was a brutal fight, testing their endurance and teamwork. By the time the last guardian fell, the team was battered and exhausted, but alive. Breathing heavily, Ethan wiped the sweat from his brow. That was insane. Hayes nodded grimly. And it's probably not over yet. Steeling themselves, they entered the cavern. Inside, the air was cool and damp, carrying the faint scent of ozone. The walls were covered in intricate carvings similar to those they'd seen at the ancient structure, glowing softly in the darkness. At the center of the cavern stood a pedestal, atop which rested the artifact, a crystalline orb pulsating with a warm golden light. "It's beautiful," Laura murmured, stepping closer. "I've never seen anything like it." Marcus examined the orb carefully, his scientific curiosity overriding his caution. "This isn't just technology. It's alive, or at least partially organic. Look at how it reacts to our presence." Indeed, the orb seemed to respond to their movements, its glow intensifying as they approached. Ethan reached out hesitantly, feeling drawn to it despite the danger they'd just faced. As his fingers brushed against its surface, a surge of energy coursed through him, flooding his mind with images. He saw galaxies forming and dying, civilizations rising and falling, wars fought across stars. He witnessed the Aurelians standing united against a great darkness, the Voidborn, and using the artifact to seal them away. But the vision ended abruptly, replaced by a single, ominous message. "Reactivation required." Ethan stumbled back, gasping for air. "It's not finished," he said, his voice shaking. "The artifact needs to be reactivated. That's why the Aurelians sent us here." "How do we reactivate it?" Hayes asked, frowning. Laura knelt beside the pedestal, studying the inscriptions around it. "These symbols, they're instructions, but they're incomplete. We'll need help deciphering them." Before anyone could suggest contacting the Aurelians, the ground began to shake again. This time the tremors were accompanied by a low, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere, and nowhere at once. The carvings on the walls lit up, casting eerie shadows across the cavern. "We're out of time," Marcus warned, looking toward the entrance. "Something's coming." Ethan clenched his fists, determination hardening his features. Then, "We don't leave until we figure this out. If the Voidborn are heading this way, we can't afford to fail." Working quickly, the team pooled their knowledge and resources. Laura used her tablet to cross-reference the symbols with the data they'd collected earlier, while Marcus attempted to replicate the melodic tones the Aurelians had used to communicate. Ethan focused on channeling the energy of the orb, trying to establish a connection with it. After what felt like hours, they finally pieced together the sequence needed to activate the artifact. Laura translated the final instruction aloud. "It requires a human component to anchor the power." All eyes turned to Ethan. "You've already touched it," Laura said gently. "You have the strongest connection to it. It has to be you." Ethan hesitated, glancing at the orb. Its light pulsed rhythmically, almost invitingly. Taking a deep breath, he placed both hands on the pedestal. Instantly, the orb flared to life, bathing the cavern in blinding light. Waves of energy radiated outward, forming a protective barrier that stretched high above them. Outside the approaching threat, a swarm of Voidborn drones slammed into the barrier, unable to penetrate it. The team watched in awe as the shield expanded, enveloping the entire colony in its glow. "It worked," Alex breathed, relief washing over him. "We actually did it." But their celebration was short-lived. As the light faded, the orb dimmed. Significantly, its energy depleted. Marcus frowned, examining the readings on his device. "This isn't permanent. The barrier will hold for now, but it won't last forever." Hayes nodded grimly. "Then we use this time wisely. We fortify the colony, prepare our defenses, and find a way to make the barrier permanent." Ethan stared at the orb, his thoughts racing. Reactivating it had been only the first step. Now they faced an even greater challenge. Surviving long, enough to fight back against the Voidborn. As they left the cavern, the weight of their mission settled heavily on their shoulders. They had uncovered a powerful tool, but wielding it effectively would require more than courage. It would demand unity, ingenuity, and sacrifice. And so, with the artifact secured and the barrier in place, the team returned to the colony. ready to face whatever came next. The battle for Aurelia, and perhaps the fate of humanity itself, was just beginning. Back at the colony, the atmosphere was tense but charged with purpose. The golden barrier shimmered faintly in the distance, a constant reminder of both their success and the looming threat beyond it. The colonists worked tirelessly to reinforce defenses, fortify structures, and prepare for what everyone knew would be an inevitable battle. Ethan, Laura, and the rest of the team were at the heart of these efforts, coordinating strategies and sharing what they had learned from their encounters with the Aurelians and the artifact. Commander Mitchell called a meeting in the command center, gathering key personnel around a large table covered with maps and schematics. "The barrier is holding for now," he began, his voice steady but laced with urgency. "But we can't rely on it forever. Marcus, give us an update." Dr. Marcus Lee adjusted his glasses, standing up to address the group. "The artifact's energy is finite. It's sustaining the barrier by drawing from its own reserves. But those reserves are dwindling. If we don't find a way to replenish or amplify its power, the shield will collapse within days." Laura leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. "What if we combine the artifact's energy with Aurelian technology? They've been using similar systems for centuries. Maybe there's a way to integrate their methods with ours." Hayes crossed his arms, skepticism evident in his tone. "That's assuming the Aurelians are willing to help. And even if they are, do we have time to figure out how their tech works?" "We don't have a choice," Ethan interjected firmly. "If we don't try, we're sitting ducks. We need to reach out to them again. Ask for their guidance." Mitchell nodded slowly. "Agreed. Laura, you'll lead the effort to establish communication with the Aurelians. Use the tones and patterns we've recorded so far. Ethan, Hayes, and Sophie, focus on preparing our forces. Alex, ensure medical supplies are ready for whatever comes next." As the meeting concluded, each member dispersed to their assigned tasks. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that time was slipping through their fingers like sand. Every moment spent planning felt like another moment closer to disaster. Later that evening, Laura sat in her lab, surrounded by glowing screens and stacks of data. She replayed the melodic tones over and over, searching for patterns that might unlock further communication with the Aurelians. Her brow furrowed as she adjusted frequencies, experimenting with variations until something clicked. A response. A series of notes echoed back, harmonizing with hers. Excited, Laura rushed to find Ethan. "I think I've made contact," she exclaimed, dragging him into the lab. "Listen." Ethan listened intently as the tones played, his eyes widening with recognition. "This is incredible. What are they saying?" "They're responding to my queries about the artifact," Laura explained, typing rapidly. "They're offering to guide us, but only if we prove ourselves worthy." "Worthy?" Ethan repeated, frowning. "How?" "They want us to complete a trial," Laura said, pulling up a holographic map projected by the Aurelians. "It's a journey to 3 sacred sites across Aurelia. At each site, we'll face challenges designed to test our resolve, intelligence, and unity." Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. Of course it's not going to be easy. Despite the risks, the team agreed to undertake the trial. With no other options on the table, proving themselves to the Aurelians seemed like their best chance of survival. Early the next morning, Ethan, Laura, Hayes, Sophie, Marcus, and Alex set out once more, guided by the Aurelians' directions. Their first destination was a towering spire located deep in a valley shrouded in perpetual mist. As they approached, the air grew colder, and an oppressive silence enveloped them. The spire itself was massive, its surface etched with intricate carvings that glowed faintly blue. "This place feels wrong," Sophie muttered, clutching her rifle tightly. "It's meant to," Laura replied softly. "These trials aren't just physical, they're psychological too." At the base of the spire, a doorway opened, revealing a dark corridor leading downward. The team exchanged uneasy glances before stepping inside. The walls pulsed with light as they descended, illuminating symbols that shifted and changed as if alive. Suddenly, the floor beneath them gave way, sending them plummeting into a chamber below. They landed hard, groaning as pain shot through their limbs. Before they could recover, shadowy figures materialized around them. Not constructs this time, but manifestations of their deepest fears. Ethan saw visions of failure, of watching the colony burn while he stood powerless to stop it. Laura faced doubts about her abilities, hearing voices whispering that she wasn't smart enough to save them. Hayes confronted memories of past missions gone wrong, haunted by the faces of those he couldn't protect. One by one, they fought back against the illusions, drawing strength from each other. When the visions finally faded, a soft chime echoed through the chamber, signaling their success. A pedestal rose from the ground, bearing a fragment of crystal that resonated with the artifact's energy. "That's one down," Ethan said, pocketing the fragment. 2 more to go. The second trial took them to a vast desert where the sun blazed mercilessly overhead. Sandstorms whipped around them, obscuring visibility and making navigation nearly impossible. Their task was to solve a series of puzzles, scattered throughout the dunes, each requiring teamwork and quick thinking. Hayes proved invaluable during this stage, his tactical mind piecing together solutions faster than anyone else. Even so, the heat and exhaustion pushed them to their limits. By the time they completed the final puzzle, they were all on the verge of collapse. Another fragment appeared, glowing brightly in the harsh sunlight. By the time they reached the third site, a frozen wasteland blanketed in snow, the team was battered but determined. The final trial tested their unity, forcing them to work together to survive increasingly dangerous environmental hazards. Ice bridges collapsed beneath them, avalanches threatened to bury them, and biting winds sapped their strength. Through sheer perseverance, they reached the end, where a third fragment awaited. As Ethan placed it alongside the others, the pieces fused together, forming a single radiant crystal. A voice, warm and melodic, filled their minds. "You have proven yourselves worthy." When they returned to the colony, the Aurelians greeted them outside the perimeter, led by Silra, the female figure Laura had bonded with earlier. Through gestures and tones, she conveyed gratitude and offered access to their advanced technology. Together, humans and Aurelians began integrating their systems, strengthening the barrier and arming the colony for the battle ahead. But the relief was short-lived. Sensors detected the Voidborn fleet breaking through the outer edges of the solar system, heading straight for Aurelia. Commander Mitchell addressed the colonists, his voice resolute. "We've fought hard to get here. Now it's time to stand our ground. For humanity. For Aurelia. For everything worth fighting for." As the Voidborn descended upon the planet, the colony braced itself for war. Ethan stood beside Laura, gripping a modified weapon powered by the artifact's energy. "Ready?" he asked quietly. She nodded, determination blazing in her eyes. "Let's show them what we're made of." And with that, the final chapter of their fight began. The sky above Aurelia darkened as the Voidborn fleet loomed closer, blotting out the stars with their jagged, menacing ships. The golden barrier shimmered faintly, holding steady for now but visibly straining under the pressure of the enemy's advance. Inside the colony, every man and woman prepared for battle, their faces etched with determination despite the fear gnawing at their hearts. Ethan stood near the main gate, his weapon in hand, watching as the Aurelians worked alongside humans to fortify the defenses. Silra moved gracefully among the colonists, her translucent form glowing softly as she helped position energy turrets powered by the artifact's fragments. Her presence was reassuring, a reminder that they weren't alone in this fight. Laura approached Ethan, her expression tense but resolute. "The barrier won't hold forever," she said quietly. "We need to make sure we're ready when it falls." "We will be," Ethan replied, gripping his weapon tighter. "We've come too far to lose now." Commander Mitchell's voice crackled over the comm system. "All units, report to your positions. The Voidborn are entering orbit. Prepare for impact." As if on cue, the ground trembled violently as the first wave of Voidborn drones descended from the sky. They were sleek and insect-like, their metallic bodies glinting ominously in the dim light. The barrier flickered under their assault, sending shockwaves rippling through the air. "Hold your fire!" Hayes shouted, standing atop a makeshift barricade. "Wait for my signal!" The tension was unbearable as everyone watched the drones, Swarm closer, their piercing screeches echoing across the battlefield. Finally, Hayes raised his arm and brought it down sharply. Fire! Weapons roared to life, unleashing a barrage of energy blasts and projectiles. The Aurelian tech-enhanced weapons proved devastatingly effective, tearing through the drone ranks. But for every one they destroyed, two more seemed to take its place. The sheer numbers were overwhelming. Ethan fired relentlessly, his muscles burning from the effort. Beside him, Laura used a portable device to hack into the drone's systems, causing several to short-circuit mid-flight. Sophie and Alex provided covering fire, while Marcus coordinated tactical adjustments from a nearby command post. Despite their best efforts, the barrier began to falter. Cracks spread across its surface, allowing some drones to slip through. Panic threatened to rise among the defenders, but Ethan refused to let it take hold. "Stay focused," he yelled, rallying those around him. "We can do this." Silra stepped forward, raising her arms. A pulse of energy erupted from her body, creating a secondary shield that pushed back the invading drones temporarily. She turned to Ethan, her melodic voice resonating in his mind. "You must act quickly. The artifact is our only hope." Ethan nodded, understanding what needed to be done. He grabbed Laura's arm and pulled her aside. "I'm going to the artifact. I'll try to amplify its power directly." "What? No," Laura protested. "It's too dangerous." "It's the only way," Ethan insisted. "If I can channel the artifact's full potential, we might stand a chance." Before Laura could argue further, Ethan sprinted toward the bay, central tower where the artifact had been installed. The journey felt endless, dodging debris and bursts of enemy fire along the way. When he finally reached the chamber housing the artifact, he found Marcus already there, frantically working on recalibrating its systems. "I knew you'd come," Marcus said without looking up. "Help me stabilize the core. We need to boost its output without overloading it." Together they worked feverishly, adjusting controls and rerouting energy flows. The artifact pulsed erratically, its glow intensifying with each passing second. Ethan placed his hands on the pedestal, feeling the familiar surge of energy coursing through him. Images flooded his mind once again, galaxies collapsing, worlds burning. But this time he saw something new, a pathway, a way to unleash the artifact's true power. "I think I can do it," Ethan said, closing his eyes and focusing all his willpower on the connection. "Just give me a minute." Outside, the situation grew dire. The secondary shield created by Silra had collapsed, and the Voidborn forces poured into the colony unchecked. Hayes led a desperate counterattack, rallying the remaining defenders in a last-ditch effort to hold the line. "Fall back to the central tower," Hayes ordered, realizing that everything hinged on Ethan's success. "Protect the artifact, at all costs." The Aurelians joined the fight, their glowing orbs emitting waves of energy that disintegrated entire swarms of drones. Even so, the tide of enemies seemed endless. Laura fought bravely, her heart pounding as she thought of Ethan risking everything inside the tower. Back in the chamber, Ethan gritted his teeth against the strain. The artifact's power surged uncontrollably, threatening to consume him. Sweat dripped down his face as he struggled to maintain control. "Come on," he muttered, pushing himself to the brink. "Just a little more." Suddenly, a blinding flash of light erupted from the artifact, engulfing the entire colony in radiant energy. The Voidborn fleet recoiled, their ships destabilizing under the intense force. Drones fell from the sky like rain, disintegrating before they hit the ground. When the light faded, Ethan collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. Marcus rushed to his side, helping him to his feet. "Did it work?" Ethan asked weakly. Marcus grinned, pointing to the window. Outside, the battlefield was eerily quiet. The Voidborn fleet had retreated, vanishing into the depths of space. Cheers erupted among the survivors as they realized the impossible. They had won. In the days that followed, the colony began the long process of rebuilding. Though battered and scarred, the sense of unity among humans and Aurelians had never been stronger. Ethan, Laura, and the rest of the team were hailed as heroes, their actions ensuring the survival of both species. As Ethan stood on the edge of the colony, gazing, at the horizon he felt a deep sense of pride and responsibility. The victory had come at great cost, but it also marked the beginning of a new era. Humanity was no longer alone in the universe. They had forged an alliance that would shape the future of countless worlds. Laura joined him, handing him a cup of steaming coffee. "What happens now?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan smiled faintly. "We keep moving forward. There's still so much to explore, so much to learn. And maybe, just maybe, we can build something better than we ever imagined." Together they watched as the sun rose over Aurelia, casting its golden light across the land. The legendary story continued, not as one of conquest or destruction, but of hope, resilience, and the unyielding spirit of those who dared to dream beyond the stars.